The ship descended slowly through the thick, toxic atmosphere of EOS 9. It was a dangerous journey, and the crew inside felt every jolt and groan of the vessel as it fought against the planet's unforgiving winds. Ethan Carter sat near the window, staring out at the alien world below. His hands gripped the armrests tightly, not because he was scared, though he should have been, but because he couldn't look away. The surface of EOS 9 was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Rivers of sulfur snaked across the ground, glowing faintly in shades of orange and yellow. Towering spires made of black rock jutted into the sky like jagged teeth, their surfaces sharp and menacing. Even from this height, the air looked heavy and poisonous, swirling with clouds of yellow haze. Beside him, Claire Bennett fidgeted nervously. She adjusted her breathing mask for the third time in 5 minutes, even though they hadn't stepped outside yet. "You think we'll be okay down there?" she asked quietly, her voice tinny over the comm system built into their helmets. Ethan glanced at her but didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure how to respond. They were scientists, trained to study planets and ecosystems, but nothing about EOS 9 seemed normal. This wasn't just another mission, it was a mystery wrapped in danger. Ethan finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "We'll be fine," he said. "The suits are designed to handle environments worse than this. Just focus on the job." Claire nodded, though she didn't look convinced. Ethan understood her unease. Back on Earth, people called EOS 9 a death world, a place so hostile that no one could survive without advanced technology. Yet somehow settlers lived here. They chose to live here. That was the question Ethan and Claire had been sent to answer. Why would anyone willingly stay on a planet like this? As the ship broke through the final layer of clouds, the landing site came into view. It was a flat expanse of cracked earth, surrounded by cliffs of dark stone. The ground shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light of the distant sun. When the landing gear touched down with a loud thud, the entire cabin shook. Ethan took a deep breath and stood up, grabbing his equipment bag. "Let's move," he said, signaling for the rest of the team to follow. Stepping out of the ship was like stepping into another dimension. The air outside was thick and acrid, burning even through the filters of their suits. Ethan squinted against the haze, trying to get a better look at their surroundings. In the distance, he could see movement, figures approaching cautiously. They were human, or at least they looked human. Their clothes were ragged, patched together from scraps of fabric and metal. Some wore scarves over their faces, shielding themselves from the harsh environment. Despite their rough appearance, they moved with purpose, their steps steady and deliberate. One of the figures stepped forward, separating herself from the group. She was a woman, taller than most of the others, with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through Ethan's helmet. Her voice came crackling over the comms as she spoke. "You're from Earth," she said, her tone neutral, but curious. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Ethan frowned slightly. How did she know? Before he could ask, she continued. "You've come to ask why we're here." Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire. The woman's words sent a chill down his spine. She was right. They had come to ask exactly that. But how could she possibly know? Was she reading their minds, or was it something else entirely? Ethan forced himself to remain calm. "Yes," he replied evenly. "We're here to understand why anyone would choose to live on a planet like this." The woman smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "My name is Lydia," she said. "I'll take you to the settlement. There you can meet the others and hear their stories." Without waiting for a response, she turned and began walking back toward the cliffs. The rest of the settlers followed, leaving Ethan and Claire no choice but to tag along. The walk to the settlement was long and grueling. Every step kicked up clouds of fine dust that clung to their suits, making it harder to breathe. The landscape around them was barren and desolate, devoid of any signs of life. Yet despite the harsh conditions, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He kept catching glimpses of movement out of the corner of his eye, shadows darting between the rocks, shapes shifting in the haze, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. After what felt like hours, they reached the settlement. It was nestled at the base of a massive cliff, its structures haphazardly built from whatever materials the settlers could scavenge. Tents made of tattered cloth leaned precariously against walls of stone. Metal sheets served as roofs, held in place by ropes and wires. Despite its chaotic appearance, the settlement had a strange sense of order. The settlers moved with efficiency, each person seemingly aware of their role within the community. Lydia led them to a large tent in the center of the settlement. Inside, several other settlers were gathered, sitting cross-legged on the ground. They greeted Ethan and Claire with nods, their expressions unreadable behind their masks. One of them, a man with a scruffy beard and calloused hands, introduced himself as Matthew. "I used to be an engineer," he said simply. "Back on Earth, I mean. I worked on skyscrapers, bridges, the kind of stuff that makes cities stand tall. But after a while, it all started to feel empty, I guess, like none of it really mattered." Claire tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" she asked. Matthew shrugged. "It's hard to explain. On Earth, everything's so easy. You don't have to fight for much anymore. Food comes from machines, water flows out of taps, and the air is clean enough to breathe without thinking twice. Life's comfortable, sure, but it's also boring, pointless. Here, though." He gestured around him. "Here, every day is a battle. Every breath is earned. And that makes it worth something." Ethan listened intently, his brow furrowed. Matthew's words struck a chord deep within him, though he wasn't ready to admit it yet. Another settler, a woman named Sarah, chimed in. "For me, it was different," she said. "I was a teacher back home. I loved my job, loved working with kids. But then I started having these dreams. Visions, really. I'd see this place, EOS 9, in my sleep. At first, I thought I was going crazy. But the more I dreamed, the stronger the pull became. Eventually, I realized I had to come here. It was like the planet itself was calling me." Claire shifted, uncomfortably. "That doesn't sound natural," she muttered under her breath. Ethan shot her a warning glance. Now wasn't the time to challenge the settlers' beliefs. Instead, he turned back to Sarah. "Do you still dream about the planet?" he asked. She nodded. "Not as often as I used to. Once you're here, the dreams stop. It's like the planet knows you've arrived." As the evening wore on, Ethan and Claire listened to more stories from the settlers. Each one was unique, yet they all shared a common thread, a longing for something greater, a desire to escape the monotony of Earth and find meaning in adversity. By the time they retired to their quarters, a small tent provided by the settlers, Ethan's mind was racing. Something about this place, about these people, felt familiar, as if he had always known, deep down, that places like EOS 9 existed, not just as physical locations but as ideas. Ideas of struggle, resilience, and purpose. Claire, however, was less enthralled. As they lay side by side in their sleeping bags, she whispered, "This isn't right, Ethan. These people, they're not thinking clearly. No one should want to live somewhere so dangerous. Something's wrong here." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He stared up at the ceiling of the tent, listening to the distant hum of the planet's winds. Finally, he said softly, "Maybe. They're not wrong. Maybe we're the ones who don't understand." And with that, he closed his eyes, letting the sounds of EOS 9 lull him to sleep. The next morning, Ethan woke up early. The sun hadn't risen yet. EOS 9 didn't have a proper sunrise, just a dim glow that filtered through the thick haze. But the settlement was already alive with activity. Settlers moved about their tasks, some carrying tools, others hauling supplies. It was strange how they seemed so at ease in such a harsh environment. Back on Earth, people avoided discomfort at all costs. Here it felt like the settlers thrived on it. Ethan stepped out of the tent and took a deep breath, though the air inside his suit was recycled and stale. He glanced around, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest. Something about this place felt different. Not just the planet itself, but the people living here. They weren't just surviving, they were connected to EOS-9 in a way he couldn't quite explain. It was as if the planet had become a part of them. Claire joined him a few minutes later, her expression guarded. "You ready for another day of interviews?" she asked dryly. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure either of them was truly prepared for what lay ahead. Yesterday's conversations had left him with more questions than answers. Today he hoped to dig deeper. Lydia appeared soon after, leading them to a new group of settlers. This time they met Rachel, a former nurse from a small town in Iowa. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant as she began to speak. "I came here because I lost someone," she said. "My daughter. She was sick, and no one could help her. After she passed, I didn't see the point in staying on Earth anymore. Everything felt hollow. Then I heard about EOS-9. At first I thought it was crazy. Why would anyone want to live somewhere so deadly? But the more I learned, the more I realized it wasn't about running away. It was about finding something worth fighting for." Ethan listened intently, his heart heavy with empathy. He couldn't imagine losing a child. Couldn't fathom the pain Rachel must have felt. And yet there was a strength in her words, a resilience that made him wonder if maybe she was right. Maybe pain could lead to purpose, and loss could give birth to meaning. Another settler, Daniel, spoke next. He was younger than most of the others, barely in his 20s. His hands were calloused, his face smudged with dirt. "I never fit in back home," he admitted. "People always told me I was too quiet, too weird. I spent most of my life feeling invisible. But here..." He paused, looking around at the settlement with a faint smile. "Here, I belong. Everyone has a role, and everyone matters. It's not perfect, but it's real." Claire scribbled notes, furiously, her pen scratching against the paper. She tried to stay focused, to remain detached, but it was getting harder. These stories weren't just data points, they were lives, raw and unfiltered. Each settler had come to EOS-9 for a reason, driven by forces they couldn't fully explain. Some sought escape, others redemption, and still others, simply a sense of belonging. Whatever their reasons, one thing was clear. They believed this planet had something to offer, something Earth couldn't provide. As the day wore on, Ethan found himself growing restless. The settler's words echoed in his mind, stirring emotions he wasn't ready to confront. He needed space to think, to process everything he'd heard. When Claire suggested taking a break, he jumped at the chance. The two of them wandered away, from the settlement heading toward the cliffs that loomed in the distance. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, littered with sharp rocks and patches of sulfur. Despite the danger, Ethan felt oddly calm. There was something mesmerizing about the landscape, something that drew him in even as it repelled him. They reached the base of the cliffs and stopped to rest. Ethan leaned against the cool stone, closing his eyes for a moment. The wind howled around them, carrying with it the faint scent of acid rain. Claire sat down nearby, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "What do you think?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "About all of this, I mean." Ethan opened his eyes and looked at her. "I don't know," he admitted. "It's complicated. These people aren't delusional, Claire. They're not brainwashed or insane. They've chosen this life because it gives them something Earth doesn't. Purpose, meaning, a reason to keep going even when things get tough." Claire frowned. "But at what cost? Look at this place. It's a death trap. Every step they take is a risk. Every breath they take could kill them. Is that really worth it?" Ethan hesitated. He wanted to argue, to defend the settlers' choices, but he couldn't deny the truth in Claire's words. EOS-9 was dangerous, perhaps more so than any other planet humanity had ever encountered. Yet the settlers didn't seem afraid. If anything, they embraced the danger, using it to fuel their determination. Before Ethan could respond, Claire stood up abruptly. "Wait here," she said. "I'm going to check out that ridge over there." She pointed to a jagged outcrop a short distance away. "It might give us a better view of the area." Ethan nodded, watching as she walked off. Alone now, he let his thoughts drift. He thought about the settlers' stories, about the pain and longing that had brought them here. He thought about Rachel's grief, Daniel's loneliness, and Matthew's search for meaning. And then he thought about himself, about the emptiness he sometimes felt back on Earth. Was it possible that EOS 9 offered something he needed too? A sudden noise snapped him out of his reverie. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver down his spine. He turned toward the sound, his eyes scanning the rocky terrain. At first he saw nothing. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of movement, a flicker of light reflecting off something metallic. Curiosity got the better of him. Leaving his spot by the cliff, Ethan cautiously approached the source of the disturbance. As he drew closer, he realized it wasn't just a random object. It was a structure, half buried in the ground. Its surface shimmered faintly, pulsating with an energy that seemed almost alive. Ethan's heart raced as he reached out to touch it. The moment his gloved hand made contact, a wave of warmth surged through him. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, filling him with a sense of calm and clarity he hadn't felt in years. Images flashed in his mind, visions of the planet, of the settlers, of himself standing amidst the chaos. And then, a single word echoed in his thoughts, clear and undeniable. Stay. Ethan stumbled back, his breath quickening. What had just happened? Was this some kind of alien technology, or was it something else entirely? He stared at the structure, its surface rippling, like liquid metal. It felt alive, aware, watching him. Ethan! Claire's voice jolted him out of his trance. She was running toward him, her expression alarmed. What are you doing? She demanded. I called your name 3 times. Ethan blinked, trying to gather his thoughts. I found something, he stammered, pointing at the structure. Claire followed his gaze, her eyes widening in shock. What is that? She whispered, stepping closer. Before Ethan could stop her, she reached out to touch it. The reaction was immediate. Claire gasped, her body stiffening as the same wave of warmth enveloped her. Her eyes glazed over, and for a moment she seemed completely still. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation faded. Claire staggered backward, clutching her head. What was that? She murmured, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The structure wasn't just a relic, it was alive. And it had spoken to them, not with words, but with feelings, with images, with a message that resonated deep within their souls. We need to tell Lydia, Claire said finally, breaking the silence. Ethan hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. No, he said firmly. Not yet. Let's figure this out ourselves first. Claire stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Are you serious? That thing, it's not natural, Ethan. We can't just ignore it. I'm not ignoring it, Ethan replied. I'm saying we need to understand it before we say anything. If we tell the settlers, they'll shut us out. They won't trust us anymore. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. She knew he was right. Reluctantly, she nodded. Fine. But we're not leaving until we know what this thing is. As they stood there, staring at the shimmering structure, Ethan felt a strange sense of resolve. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a random discovery. It was a key, a clue to understanding why humans had chosen to live on a death world, and he was determined to find out why. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something inside him had shifted. The structure they discovered the day before lingered in his thoughts, its pulsating energy and the single word it had whispered, stay. It wasn't just a suggestion, it felt like an invitation, a call that resonated deep within him. Claire noticed the change too. Over breakfast at the settlement, she watched him closely, her brow furrowed with concern. You've been acting strange since yesterday, she said finally, breaking the silence. What's going on? Ethan hesitated, stirring his ration pack absently. I don't know, he admitted. It's like, I can't stop thinking about that thing we found, about what it showed me. Claire sighed, setting her spoon down. Ethan, you're not seriously considering staying here, are you? This place is dangerous. These people, they're not thinking clearly. Whatever pulled them here, whatever made them stay, it's not natural. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that the settlers weren't crazy or misled. But how could he explain what he was feeling when he barely understood it himself? Instead, he changed the subject. We need to go back, he said. To the structure. There's more to it than we saw yesterday. Claire frowned. You mean now? Today? When Ethan nodded, she crossed her arms. Fine. But if this is some kind of trap, I'm blaming you. They left the settlement quietly, avoiding the curious glances of the settlers. As they walked toward the cliffs, Ethan felt a pull in his chest, as though the structure was calling out to him again. The closer they got, the stronger the sensation became. By the time they reached it, his heart was pounding, his palms sweaty inside his gloves. The structure looked exactly as it had the day before, half buried in the ground, its surface shimmering faintly. But now it seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched Ethan's heartbeat. Claire stopped a few feet away, her eyes wide. It's glowing brighter, she murmured. Ethan stepped closer, reaching out tentatively. This time, when his hand touched the surface, the reaction was even stronger. A rush of warmth spread through his body, followed by a flood of images. Visions of towering cities built into the cliffs, of settlers working together to create something beautiful amidst the chaos. But beneath the beauty lay shadows, warnings of what awaited those who resisted the planet's influence. Claire reached for his arm, pulling him back. Stop, she snapped. You're losing yourself, Ethan. Can't you see that? Whatever this thing is, it's messing with your mind. Ethan shook his head, struggling to focus. No, Claire, it's not messing with me. It's showing me the truth. This planet, it's alive. It's not just a rock floating in space. It's aware. Claire stared at him, her expression torn between fear and disbelief. Alive? Aware? That's impossible. Planets aren't sentient, Ethan. They're just chunks of rock and gas. Then how do you explain this? Ethan gestured at the structure, his voice rising. How do you explain the settlers' stories? They all talk about hearing a call, about feeling drawn here, and now we've felt it too. You can't deny it, Claire. Something about this place is real. It's powerful. Claire opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. She wanted to dismiss everything Ethan was saying, to chalk it up to stress or exhaustion, but deep down, she knew he was right. Ever since touching the structure, she'd felt something, a faint whisper, in the back of her mind, urging her to stay. She'd tried to ignore it, to push it away, but it refused to leave her alone. Before either of them could say anything else, footsteps echoed behind them. They turned to see Lydia approaching, her face unreadable. You've returned, she said simply, stopping a few paces away. Her gaze flicked from Ethan to Claire, then to the structure. I wondered when you'd come back. How did you know we were here? Claire asked, her tone sharp. Lydia smiled faintly. The planet tells us things, she replied. It speaks to those who listen. Ethan stepped forward. What is this thing? He demanded. What does it want? Lydia tilted her head, studying him carefully. It doesn't want anything, she said. Not in the way you think. It's not a machine or a tool. It's part of the planet itself, a fragment of its consciousness. When you touch it, it shows you truths. Not lies, not illusions, but truths about who you are and what you need. Claire shook her head. That's insane. How can a planet have a consciousness? How can it know what we need? It doesn't know, Lydia corrected gently. It feels. It senses. And it responds to those who seek it. Some people hear its call without ever coming here. Others feel it only when they arrive, but once you've heard it, there's no ignoring it. It changes you. Ethan glanced at Claire, seeing the doubt written across her face. He understood her skepticism. Back on Earth, logic ruled everything. Science explained the world in neat, predictable terms, but EOS 9 defied explanation. It wasn't bound by the rules of human understanding. It was something greater, something beyond. We don't have to understand it to respect it, Ethan said softly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the planet isn't trying to control us. Maybe it's offering us a choice to stay or to leave, to embrace the struggle or to run from it. Claire frowned. And what happens if we choose to stay? What happens if we let it change us? Lydia's smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet seriousness. That's up to you, she said. The planet doesn't force anyone to remain. Those who stay do so because they feel they belong here, because they find meaning in the fight, in the challenge. But it's not easy. Living here means giving up comfort, safety, certainty. It means facing danger every day. Not everyone is ready for that. Ethan looked at the structure again, its surface rippling like liquid. He thought about the visions he'd seen, the sense of purpose that had filled him. He thought about the emptiness he sometimes felt back on Earth, the longing for something more. Could this be the answer he'd been searching for? Claire must have sensed his internal struggle. Don't do this, Ethan, she pleaded. Whatever it's offering, it's not worth it. We don't belong here. None of us do. Ethan turned. To her, his expression conflicted. Maybe we do, he said. Maybe this is where we're supposed to be. Claire shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. If you stay, I'm leaving. I can't watch you throw your life away for something you don't even understand. Ethan didn't respond. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be okay. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he made his decision. As the sun dipped below the horizon, or what passed for a horizon on EOS 9, the three of them stood in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The planet waited patiently, its whispers echoing in their minds. For Ethan, the choice was clear. He had always been searching for something, though he hadn't known what. Now, standing on the edge of the unknown, he realized he might have found it. For Claire, the choice was equally clear. But in the opposite direction. She couldn't stay. She wouldn't. The planet's call was strong, but her instincts screamed louder. She needed to leave, to escape the pull before it consumed her completely. Lydia watched them both, her expression calm but knowing. The planet doesn't judge, she said finally. It simply offers. The rest is up to you. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan and Claire alone with their thoughts, and the shimmering structure that had changed everything. The next morning, the team prepared to leave EOS 9. The ship stood ready on the cracked Earth, its engines humming softly as the crew loaded the last of their equipment. Most of the settlers had gathered to watch them go, their faces unreadable, behind scarves and masks. Claire stood near the ramp, her helmet tucked under one arm, her eyes scanning the group for Ethan. She hadn't seen him since their argument the night before, and a knot of worry tightened in her chest. Ethan wasn't with the others. He was standing a short distance away, his gaze fixed on the settlement. Claire hesitated, then walked over to him. It's time, she said quietly. Her voice wavered slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. The ship's ready. Ethan didn't turn to look at her. For a long moment, he said nothing, his body tense as though caught between two worlds. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. I'm staying. Claire froze, her heart sinking. She had known this was coming, hadn't she? But hearing it aloud made it real. You can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. This place, it's dangerous. It's not worth it. It is to me, Ethan replied. He finally turned, to face her, his expression resolute but gentle. I know you don't understand, Claire. Maybe I don't fully understand it either. But this planet, it's given me something I've been searching for my whole life. Purpose, meaning, a reason to keep going even when things get hard. Claire shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. That's not enough, Ethan. You're giving up everything, your life, your future, all for some feeling, some idea that this rock wants you here. It's not just a feeling, Ethan said firmly. It's real. The planet speaks to us, Claire. It shows us who we are. I've never felt more alive than I do here, and I can't walk away from that. Claire wanted to argue, to plead with him to change his mind. But deep down, she knew it was useless. Ethan had made his choice, and no amount of reasoning would sway him. Instead, she reached out and grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Promise me one thing," she said, her voice trembling. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself, that you'll remember who you are." Ethan nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I promise," he said. "And you don't forget about me, okay? Don't let Earth make you forget what matters." Claire managed a weak smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I won't," she whispered. Then, before she could lose her composure completely, she turned and walked back toward the ship. As the ramp lifted and the hatch sealed shut, Ethan stood alone on the barren soil. Behind him, Lydia approached, her steps slow and deliberate. She stopped beside him, her gaze following the ship as it rose into the sky. "You made the right choice," she said softly. Ethan nodded, though he didn't feel entirely sure. The ship grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared into the haze above. For the first time since arriving on EOS 9, he felt truly alone. And yet, strangely, not lonely at all. The planet surrounded him, its presence heavy and constant, like an old friend welcoming him home. Inside the ship, Claire sat by the viewport, staring down at the shrinking settlement. Her hands gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles white. She tried to focus on the mission report she'd need to write once they returned to Earth, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan, to the way he'd looked at her when he said goodbye, to the conviction in his voice when he talked about purpose and meaning. She glanced at the others on the crew. They were busy securing equipment or reviewing data, their expressions neutral. None of them seemed particularly bothered by leaving EOS 9 behind. To them, it was just another hostile planet, another failed experiment in human expansion. But to Claire, it was something more, something she couldn't quite explain. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, the view outside the viewport shifted from toxic haze to endless stars. Claire leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. For a brief moment, she thought she heard a faint whisper, a sound so soft it could have been her imagination. It wasn't words exactly, but a feeling, a sense of longing, of belonging. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. This was ridiculous. She was leaving EOS 9 behind just like she'd planned, just like she needed to. So why did she feel like she was abandoning something important? Back on the surface, Ethan began to settle into his new life. The settlers welcomed him without hesitation, teaching him how to navigate the planet's dangers and contribute to the community. At first, every step felt foreign, every task overwhelming. But slowly he found his rhythm. The planet's harshness became less intimidating and more invigorating. Every challenge he faced reminded him why he'd chosen to stay. One evening, as the acid rain pattered against the roof of the settlement, Ethan sat with Lydia in the central tent. A fire crackled in the corner, casting flickering shadows across the walls. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Staying here, I mean." Lydia smiled faintly, stirring her cup of tea. "Regret isn't part of life on EOS 9, she said. "We don't have time for it. Every day is a gift, even the hard ones. Regretting anything would mean wasting that gift." Ethan nodded, letting her words sink in. He thought about Claire, about the life he'd left behind. Did he miss it sometimes? But more often he felt grateful for the clarity he'd found, for the people who had accepted him, for the planet that had called him home. Weeks passed, then months. The memories of Earth began to fade, replaced by the rhythms of EOS 9. Ethan learned to read the signs of an impending storm, to harvest edible fungi from the cliffs, to repair shelters damaged by the winds. He worked alongside Matthew, Daniel, Rachel, and the others, each day bringing new challenges and new triumphs. But there were moments when the weight of his decision pressed down on him. Late at night, lying in his sleeping bag, he would think about Claire. about the warmth of Earth's sun, the comfort of its cities, about the ease of a life he'd traded for struggle and uncertainty. In those moments, doubt crept in, whispering that maybe he'd made a mistake. Then he would step outside, breathing in the sharp, acrid air, and look up at the swirling haze above. The planet's whispers would return, softer now but still present. "Stay," they said. "You belong here." And each time Ethan would nod, feeling the doubt dissolve, because deep down, he knew the truth. This was where he was meant to be. Far above, orbiting another star system entirely, Claire stared out the viewport of the research station where she now worked. Her mission report on EOS 9 had been filed weeks ago, but the planet refused to leave her mind. She dreamed about it often, about the settlers' stories, about the shimmering structure, about Ethan standing alone as the ship lifted off. Sometimes late at night she thought she heard the whispers too. Faint, fleeting, almost imperceptible. They weren't loud enough to disrupt her work or her daily routine, but they lingered nonetheless. A reminder of something she couldn't quite name. One evening, as she gazed at the stars, a colleague approached her. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Something on your mind?" Claire hesitated, then shook her head. "Just thinking," she replied. "About choices. About how much they matter." Her colleague frowned, confused, but didn't press further. As he walked away, Claire turned back to the viewport, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, EOS 9 waited, patient and eternal, calling to those who dared to listen. And somewhere deep within her, a faint voice echoed, a reminder that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's greatest discoveries weren't found in safety or comfort. Perhaps they were found in the struggle, in the chaos, in the places that tested the limits of what it meant to be alive. For the first time in months, Claire smiled. Months passed, and life on EOS 9 continued its relentless rhythm. The settlers worked together, their days filled with tasks that tested their strength and resolve. For Ethan, the initial shock of living on a death world had faded, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. Every challenge, whether it was repairing a shelter battered by acid rain or navigating the jagged cliffs to gather resources, felt like a step forward. A way to prove himself worthy of the planet's call. But even as he grew more comfortable, there were moments when the weight of his decision pressed heavily on him. Late at night, lying in his sleeping bag, Ethan would think about Claire. He wondered how she was doing, whether she still thought of him. He imagined her back on Earth, surrounded by the comforts and conveniences he'd left behind. Did she regret leaving him? Did she understand why he'd stayed? One evening, as the settlement prepared for another storm, Ethan found himself sitting alone near the edge of the cliffs. The sulfuric rivers below glowed faintly in the dim light, their surface rippling like liquid fire. He stared at them, trying to quiet the restless thoughts swirling in his mind. Behind him, Lydia approached quietly, her steps nearly silent against the rocky ground. "You look troubled," she said, sitting down beside him. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of concern in it. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I was just thinking about Claire," he admitted. "About Earth. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice." Lydia nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's natural to feel that way," she said. "Even those of us who've been here for years still question ourselves sometimes. But doubt isn't the enemy, Ethan. It's part of being human. What matters is what you do with it." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Lydia turned to look at him, her eyes piercing. "Doubt can either hold you back or push you forward. It all depends on how you respond. Do you let it paralyze you, or do you use it to grow stronger?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought about her words, letting them sink in. She was right. Doubt wasn't something to fear. It was a reminder that he cared, that he wanted to make the right choices. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Meanwhile, far away in orbit around a distant star system, Claire tried to focus on her work. She had been assigned to a new research project, studying the effects of low gravity on plant growth. It was fascinating work, and it kept her busy most days. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the memory of EOS 9. At night, when the station was quiet and the stars stretched endlessly outside her viewport, Claire found herself thinking about Ethan. About the way he had looked at her before she left, the conviction in his voice when he talked about staying. She wondered if he was happy, if he felt fulfilled. Or was he struggling, regretting his decision? Her colleagues noticed the change in her. "You're distracted," one of them commented during a team meeting. "Is everything okay?" Claire forced a smile. "I'm fine," she said. "Just adjusting." But deep down, she knew it wasn't true. Something was missing, though. She couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Back on EOS 9, the settlers faced one of their toughest challenges yet. A massive storm swept across the planet, bringing with it winds so strong they threatened to tear apart the settlement. The settlers worked tirelessly, reinforcing shelters and securing supplies. Ethan threw himself into the effort, determined to prove his worth to the community. As the storm raged, he found himself standing near the shimmering structure again. Its surface pulsed faintly, glowing brighter with each gust of wind. Ethan reached out, placing his hand on it. Instantly, warmth spread through him, calming his racing heart. Visions filled his mind, images of the settlers working together, building something greater than themselves. Amidst the chaos, there was beauty, purpose. When the storm finally passed, the settlement was battered but intact. The settlers gathered in the central tent, exhausted but triumphant. Ethan sat among them, feeling a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. This was his home now. These were his people. On the research station, Claire received a message from Earth. It was a report summarizing the findings from their mission to EOS 9. As she read through it, her heart sank. The document dismissed the settlers' stories as delusions, labeling the planet as nothing more than a hostile environment unfit for human habitation. There was no mention of the structure, no acknowledgement of the whispers Claire herself had heard. Frustrated, she set the report aside. How could they get it so wrong? EOS 9 wasn't just a death world. It was alive, aware, offering something humanity desperately needed. But how could she explain that without sounding crazy? That night, as she stared out the viewport, Claire made a decision. She pulled up the communication console and began typing a private message. When she finished, she hesitated, then hit send. The message was addressed to Ethan. Weeks later, Ethan received the message. It was short and simple, but it meant everything to him. "I don't understand it all," Claire wrote, "but I believe you. Be safe, Ethan. Don't forget who you are." Ethan read the message over and over, a lump forming in his throat. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear those words. For the first time in months, he felt truly connected to Claire again, not as someone who had left, but as someone who understood. He replied immediately. "Thank you," he wrote. "That means more than you know. Take care of yourself. Claire, maybe one day you'll come back and see it for yourself." As the days turned into weeks, both Ethan and Claire found themselves changed by their experiences. Ethan embraced his new life on EOS 9, finding strength in the planet's challenges and comfort in the community of settlers. Claire, meanwhile, began to question the world she had always taken for granted. Earth was safe, yes, but it lacked the raw intensity of EOS 9. It lacked purpose. One evening, as she gazed at the stars, Claire whispered a single word to herself. "Stay." The planet didn't respond, not directly, but somewhere deep within her a faint whisper echoed, a reminder that perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest discoveries weren't found in safety or comfort. They were found in the struggle, in the chaos, in the places that tested the limits of what it meant to be alive. And as the stars twinkled above, Claire smiled. Someday, she promised herself, she would return to EOS 9. Until then, she would carry its lessons with her, wherever she went.